excited about this book. So Ecclesiastes, let's pray real quick. I will read through the chapter, so we're in chapter 2, and then we'll go verse by verse by verse and just kind of dig deep and dive into this thing. So, verse 1, I said in my heart, go now, and I will prove thee with mirth. Therefore enjoy pleasure, and behold, this is also vanity. So section 1 is vanity in pleasure, verse 1 through 11. Section 2 is going to be vanity in wisdom versus fools, verse 12 through 17. Section 3, vanity in labor, verses 18 through 23. And section 4, enjoy your portion, verse 24 and 26. We finish off chapter 1 with King Solomon telling us that knowledge was vanity. In chapter 2, Solomon is going to pursue the pleasure the earth can provide. He's going to seek out every single type of pleasure to try to fill the hole in his heart. Section 1 here, to prove thee. Right? He says he's going to prove thee, which is the nasa, which means to test. He's going to go through an experiment. And he's going to test all these different things to see if he can find the purpose of doing it. Okay? To prove thee. So then he's going to test it through what is known as mirth, the simcha. He's going to test the pleasures of the world. This sort of pleasure is speaking of gratifying personal desires. Solomon here says here that he's going to try and experience everything that would be enjoyable to man that he can find. This is going to include sin. We know that in Romans 3:23, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Solomon was not exempt from this. He was seeking earthly pleasures. Solomon figures that he can find joy within happiness. So he tries to have as much fun as he possibly can.
So he's gonna do all this stuff to find which one is the most enjoyable.
He's trying to find purpose in life. So what he's looking for is he checked the first chapter. He looked at knowledge. What's the purpose of finding knowledge? Right? He found that it was pointless. Right? And we'll get to the second half to that in a second. But chapter 2, he's going to look at the earthly pleasures. Right? Not knowledge, but music and buildings, and we're going to go with all these different things. So he's going to test happiness and pleasure to see if it brings purpose to his life. He tries as much fun as he can possibly have, experiencing all the different kinds of music and dancing, women, different types of games, and athletic contests. He once again found it all to be pointless. This word vanity, we're going to read this one over and over and over. This is the havel. This B kind of sounds like a V, the havel. The vanity is a vapor, a breath, and emptiness, but figuratively, it means unsatisfactory. So he says he finds it all vanity. He says, I found no satisfaction. I hunted this down, I did these things, and I just got nothing out of it. Right? So you'll see this word vanity over and over and over. Vanity and vexation of spirit, which we'll get to here in just a minute. So you say that he thought it all to be fleeting and nothing was substantial. Verse 2. He says, and I said of laughter, it is mad, and of mirth, what doeth it? So looking back at all the laughter he's experienced during those times, it says he finds it mad. Mad is the halal. It means to make a show or to boast, thus being clamorously foolish. Good times were pointless, and all the while he was laughing and enjoying himself, he was doing nothing more than making a fool out of himself. So what was the point of all the pleasure that he was experiencing? It was all empty and a waste of time. It accomplished nothing. He was laughing, joking, having a good time. Pointless. Right? Solomon's in a funk when he's writing this book here. But he finds it all to be pointless. Now in verse 3, he says, so I sought in mine heart to give myself unto wine, yet acquainting mine heart with wisdom, and to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was that good for the sons of men, which they should do under the sun all the days of their life. So next on the list was experiencing wine. Now Solomon was not planning on becoming a drunk. That's not what he's saying here, right? He was going to be what is known as a connoisseur, right? He wanted to taste the best of the best, to experience the most exquisite taste sensations. He thought that if he could do this, then he would then relax and find peace and joy. Gratifying the flesh never seems to work well for anyone, but Solomon, as I said, was not trying to be a drunk. He said that he would acquaint his heart with wisdom while he was doing this, okay? So this word acquainting, the nahab, means to guide. So he knows as well as anybody that drinking too much alcohol is a bad thing. Anything gluttonous is bad, okay? But he said what he did is, I wanted to taste this, but I wanted to be wise about it. So he guided his heart with wisdom as so not to become addicted. He would not relinquish himself to depravity. He did not wish to become addicted to alcohol. He was after taste satisfaction. Now, there are many places today that do this. They're called wine tastings. People will go to the fancy buildings, these fancy halls, get a little glass of wine poured in it, swirl it around, smell it, swish it around in their mouth, and they'll spit it out. It's all about the taste, the flavor. They want to see the subtle notes of this and the subtle notes of that. Right? This is what Solomon is going after. He goes, I want to taste the best things that are out there. Like, he doesn't want to just tap the keg and go crazy. That's not what we're doing here. He wanted to taste. He's going for a specific thing. Now, next in the verse is where Solomon tries folly. Now, folly, the sikluth, means silliness. He's searching for purpose and being silly. Since wisdom hadn't found him joy, he figured he would try to be goofy and playful. Harmless and enjoyable forms of nonsense. He figured that sometimes people who didn't take things or themselves so seriously seemed to be in a better mood all the time. The people who weren't super smart and wise seemed to be freer to enjoy things, right? He looked at things like trivia, indulgence, and amusement. In other words, different ways for one to pass the time during their short time under the sun. But he found no satisfaction there either. Goofiness. He says it was pointless. He says having a good time, poking fun on it. Yeah. It's like, why? Why am I doing this? Once again, vanity. He couldn't find any purpose in being silly. Everybody likes being silly, but Solomon couldn't find purpose in it. So now verse 4 and 5 are kind of together here. He goes and he says, I made me great works. I builded me houses. I planted me vineyards. I made me gardens and orchards, and I planted trees in them of all kinds of fruit. So far, Solomon had searched for joy in education, pleasure, wine, and folly, and was unsuccessful. Next, he was going to try real estate. He's going to try searching in his possessions for joy. Solomon embarks on a massive building adventure. He builds mansions and vineyards, gardens. He puts edible fruit trees all over the place. Now I can imagine him and his friends going through and like showing off these grand places, right? He's like, look what I've built. Look at this house that I have. Look at this concert hall that I have. Look at these gardens that I've built. And then with that, receiving praises and glory from his friends. You know, you walk in and be like, look at my car. Be like, oh, you have the coolest car. And people like, you have the most amazing buildings, right? He's looking for the satisfaction from people expressed in the things that he owns. He's the richest man, he's the wisest man, he can do anything he wants, so he just builds. It's nothing. Unfortunately, these gardens have never been archaeologically found. They haven't found these yet. But the king's garden is mentioned several times in the Old Testament. In Nehemiah 3:15, 2 Kings 25:4, Jeremiah 39:4, and then in Zechariah 14:10, they're called the king's wine presses. Fun little area. Though they do believe this is the little area here, Corning Valley, where they believe some of it is. But again, they haven't been able to actually find anything of it. It's been all torn down. So Solomon spared no expense when creating these masterworks of engineering. Okay? Just imagine the most opulent buildings today. What Solomon created would make them look bland. The most expensive buildings in existence today, you have the mosque in Mecca, top left there, $120 billion. The Raj Al Bayt, also in Mecca, this building stands directly behind it. That's actually the edge of it right here. That building is worth $19.5 billion. And then the Marina Bay Sands in Singapore, down here, $7.79 billion. Building in opulence has always been a thing. Solomon says it's all vanity, pointless. pointless. That building right there has been in several different movies. They're incredible. They're beautiful structures. The engineering in these things are absolutely incredible. Solomon says, I built these things. I built grander things. For naught. For nothing. Verse 6, it says, I made me pools of water to water, therewith the wood that bringeth forth trees. So with these massive building projects and gardens, Solomon built irrigation systems. He made aqueducts, lakes, ponds, including all the necessary canals and ditches to support and water all the fruit trees that he had done. Massive efforts are being put into these buildings and properties, but they're all, again, tons of money, but nothing. It's like, did it all. Beautiful buildings, all the aqueduct, the engineering that it would take to support these things is insane. So again, he's like, why? Solomon's sitting there reading this thing, he's like in a big depression. Verse 7, he goes, I got me servants and maidens, and had servants born in my house. Also I had great possessions of great and small cattle above all that were in Jerusalem before me. So in order to run these vast estates, Solomon got servants. Bed, slaves, servants. Men and women were needed to run these places. Some were hired servants, some were slaves. Solomon mentions that those slaves and servants had children born while working there. Now the reason being is because this is a huge status symbol of the ancient world. Huge for power, prestige, to have servants and slaves and being able to not only to support them, but for them to have their own families and have children is to show that you are just massively wealthy and you're just on top of your game. Huge status symbol for this. To most people, including Solomon, here it is considered a great status symbol to be served by others. But if you can have people doing everything for you, obeying your every command, this would make people think that you are a very important and a well-regarded person. Okay, again, he's looking for status, right? He's looking for people to look at him and be like, ooh, I want what you have. Ooh, look what you're doing, I want it. But we know that true greatness is not in being served, but in serving others. Mark 10, verse 43 through 45 says this, but so shall it not be among you, but whosoever will be great among you shall be your minister or servant. And whosoever of you will be the chiefest shall be servant of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister and to give his life a ransom for many. Verse 8. It says, and I gathered me also silver and gold and the peculiar treasures of kings and of provinces. I got me men singers and women singers, and the delights of the Son of Men as musical instruments, and that of all sorts. King Solomon then investigated the hoarding of money. He gathered silver and gold and peculiar treasure, the segula, valued properties. So this would include wealth taken from conquered people, objects of art, right? Goblets and coins and crowns and paintings, and let your imagination run wild. He gathered it all, right? Through war, through conquering, through tributes. The countries he'd come in to like take him over, they'd be like, hey, let us just give you some money. Don't beat us up, right? And he was like, give me all of your finest things. He's looking for joy in money, right? We know how that works. Love of money is root of all evil. We talked about that, right? In 1 Timothy. Money doesn't bring you anything. And hoarding cash doesn't do any good whatsoever. We talked about the story of the man who hoarded his riches and needed to build another barn to keep hoarding his riches. And what God said, he goes, today you're going to die. I'm going to give it all to somebody else. Pointless. He found nothing in it. Right? So then he tried music. He gathered the finest singers, male and female, and of all the instruments that one can imagine. He would hold lavish concerts and probably private concerts as well, right? Imagine having the finest music played for you at all of your meals, dinner and a show every night with the finest musicians, people who don't mess up, unlike me, I mess up all the time playing music, right? The finest musicians, the finest singers with the best songs all the time. Now, the word musical instrument is kind of interesting. The shida means concubine, wife, and harem, but the actual true definition of it is unknown. The term musical instrument was chosen based on the context of the music and everything. He brought in all the musical instruments and delights of the men singers and the women, right? But we know that Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines. You can read about that in 1 Kings 11:3. Talks about all that stuff. We've also discussed that. Bad idea. Now, the delusion is still believed in today's society that sex is a highway to happiness and fulfillment. Single-parent households, STDs, abortion, the abuse of sex, it leads to ruin. It leads to ruin. It's no good whatsoever. But it can be true if it is enjoyed with a monogamous realm of God-appointed marriage. For Solomon, he took it too far. Sinning, right? 700 wives, 300 concubines. Again, he found it pointless. It did nothing for him. He still had this hole in his heart. It's driving him crazy. Verse 9 says, he goes, "So I was great and increased more than all that were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me." Solomon was able to experience the pleasures of this world to the extent that no man could before him could ever have achieved, and was still able to keep his head together. He didn't let any of these things take him away. He did not allow himself to be carried away with the pleasures. This whole thing was an experiment to him. Solomon was analyzing everything. He was a detective trying to figure out what the purpose of everything was. He's like, I'm going to try this. I have an idea. I'm going to find the purpose, the reason why. I want to find joy. What brings the joy? So he starts going after everything. It's a test. We check the wine, right? He's like, I'm not trying to get drunk. I want to have the best flavors. I don't want to become the greatest musician. I want to experience the best, right? So he was able to keep himself together and didn't get carried away, is what verse 9 is talking about here. Now in verse 10, he says, "And whatsoever mine eyes desired, I kept not from them. I withheld not my heart from any joy, for my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and this was my portion of all my labor." So he says, if I wanted it, I got it. Simple as that. Because I saw it, I desired it, I took it. He kept nothing from himself in the pursuit. Solomon found a bit of gratification in the gathering and spending of everything. It felt good to be able to search out these things. All the earthly pleasures and possessions hadn't brought him what he was hoping to achieve. His reward, his portion, was short-lived. You guys have ever experienced buyer's remorse? You ever wanted something really, really bad, and you saved and saved and saved and saved, and you just went and got it, and then it was like so cool, and then you're like, ooh, should I have gotten that? Is that really the best use of my money? That's what he's talking about. He goes, I had so much fun building and spending and getting and doing. And I realized there was no point. I felt bad about it. Interesting sensation, right? That you could have anything you wanted to, and yet, when you get it, nothing. The hole is still there. Verse 11, he continues, he goes, "Then I looked on all the works that my hands had wrought, and on the labor that I had labored to do, and behold, all was vanity and vexation of spirit, and there was no profit under the sun." Solomon takes a pause to look about and consider everything he had accomplished and experienced. Takes a step back and looks around. All the things that he'd done. The time and energy that it took to build the buildings and the gardens. The money he had spent on all the entertainment. The times of laughing and singing and being goofy. All vanity. Unsatisfactory. Unsubstantial. Not only does he describe it as vexation, the re'uth, it left him still longing. He still wanted more, right? After all of this, his soul wanted more. But the problem is that he wanted more of what? The hole inside of himself, he was unable to fill with the world. If you've been able to get everything you've ever wanted and more along the way, and in the end you still long for more, what's the point? There's no reason to do any of it at all. It's pointless, he says. Can you imagine? Just think for a second. Anything you want. Anything. You're like, that, and it's yours. That. Just walk through the mall, like, just in the back, boys. You get home, you're so excited, you're like, yes, look at all this stuff I did, and the money, I got all the things, and you're like, Now what? I want more. But if you have everything, what is there still wanting? What is there to want if you have it all? That's what he's saying. He's like, I realized I still wanted something. It didn't do anything for me. That's rough. Couldn't imagine. Section 2. Vanity and wisdom versus the vanity of fools. Verse 12. It says, and I turned myself to behold wisdom and madness and folly. For what can the man do that cometh after the king? Even that which hath been already done. So, verse 12 is saying, being completely disheartened by the result of his previous search for purpose within the temporal pleasures of the world, he decided to see if it was better to be wise or to live as a fool. Now you can read in 1 Kings 3 through 15, the story of Solomon asking God for wisdom. Okay, so we know he's the wisest man that ever existed. He asked God to be the most wise. And so now he says he wants to see if it has done any good for him. So is it a good thing for me to ask for wisdom? Right? Is life better to be lived with prudence or not? Solomon strives to be the final say. No one coming after him will be able to learn more than he, being he is the wisest man alive. He's the wisest, he's the richest guy. He said, who can figure this out better than me? I'm going to figure it out. Was it a good thing to ask God for wisdom? Or would it have been better for me to just be a putz? Verse 13. He says, then I saw that wisdom excelleth folly, as far as light excelleth darkness. Interesting verse. He concludes that wisdom is better than folly, in that being wise, you can see the problems that are coming your way. Being wise, you're able to plan and to see around the things that are coming at you. A fool is only able to grope along, tripping in the darkness as he goes, and will fall into every ditch along the way. So he says, hey, got this much so far. Being wise, I can kind of foresee a little bit. Like, I probably shouldn't do that because this will happen, and this will probably happen, and then there's that ditch that I don't want to be in. So where a fool is just into the ditch, right? So it's probably better to be wise than a fool. Verse 14 said, the wise man's eyes are in his head, but the fool walketh in darkness. And I myself perceived also that one event happeneth to them all. But it says, the wise guy can see ahead of himself to help stop jumping into the pits and the mistakes. So where the fool is going to jump into every single pit and every single sidebar and have all the problems. But the same fate waits for us all. Solomon wonders why he put so much worth into being wise. Seeing and planning doesn't seem to really matter much in the end. So he concludes that even the pursuit of wisdom is vanity. So what is this event that happens to us all? In verse 15. Then I said in my heart, as it happened to the fool, so it happened even to me. And why was I then more wise? Then I said in my heart that this also is vanity. The same fate waits for us all. Solomon wonders why he put so much worth into being wise. Dying doesn't seem to really matter much in the end. Death. Death waits for us all. Verse 16 and 17, together here, it says, for there is no remembrance of the wise more than of the fool forever. Seeing that which now is in the days to come shall all be forgotten. And how dieth the wise man? As the fool. Therefore I hated life, because the work that is wrought under the sun is grievous unto me, for all is vanity and vexation of spirit. Solomon continues with the idea of death. It says, whether you're wise and you avoid all the pitfalls, or you're a fool and you jump into all of them, in the end, 6 feet in the dirt. He continues with this idea of death and how we're all going to experience it, no matter how wise or unwise we are. He says that as soon as the funeral is done, both are quickly forgotten. Kind of a sad thought, right? Think about this though. Can you name me one celebrity from the early 20th century? Just one. What about the 19th century? Tell me one person that lived 100 years ago that was a celebrity, was famous. 200 years ago? That's what he's saying. He says it doesn't matter. Wise, fool, rich, poor. you're going to get forgotten. It's all vanity. It's a vapor. Dust in the wind. So goes the song. Right? So he's falling into this depression here, saying, no one's going to even remember me. Now, Solomon's in the Bible, so we all get to remember him. But he's saying, look back. He goes, I can't think of anybody a couple hundred years ago that's worth remembering. Solomon says both will die and be forgotten. Because of this, he hated life. He saw life itself as pointless. If death was the only conclusion, what's the point of living? He begins to see no point in even living. Everything he puts his efforts into is pointless, he says. He is not able to find any satisfaction and or fulfillment in anything he's put his mind to. Once again, all is vanity and vexation of spirit. Oofta. That's rough, right? Solomon's having a rough go with this one. Death. The wages of sin is death. Right? Romans 6:23. Section 3. Vanity and labor. Right? He continues. You think he's got nothing else to talk about? He's got lots more. Verse 18 says this. Yea, I hated all my labor which I had taken under the sun, because I should leave it unto the man that shall be after me. Solomon realizes that because he's going to die, that he's going to have to leave everything to someone else. This makes him hate all of the effort he put into gathering it up. He says, I've done all this work, all this effort, all this planning, and I'm going to die, and somebody else is going to get it. And this really upsets him. He's like, no, right? Verse 19, he continues in on this, so with whether he shall be wise man or a fool. Yet shall he have rule over all of my labor wherein I have labored, and wherein I have showed myself wise under the sun. This is also vanity. He says, there's no guarantee that whosoever gets what Solomon leaves will be a wise man. There's always a chance that they will be very unwise with what has been given to them. People who do not work for the riches they inherit rarely appreciate them as the people who have to work hard to get them. Think about it. If you work your entire life to build up and to make happen, and then upon your death, somebody gets it and just spends it all on a weekend. Right? It's like, well, what was the point of that? Maybe while looking at his son Rehoboam, he realized that would be exactly what would happen. We know from the Bible that this is exactly what happened. When Egypt invaded Jerusalem, Rehoboam buys them off with the temple treasures, needing to replace the gold shields with brass. You can read about that story in 2 Chronicles 12, 9 through 10. His son wastes everything. All of it. Verse 20 and 21 together here. Therefore I went about to cause my heart to despair of all the labor which I took under the sun. For there is a man whose labor is in wisdom, and in knowledge, and in equity. Yet to a man that hath not labored therein shall he leave it for his portion. This is also vanity and a great evil. This realization brought Solomon into a deep depression. Deep depression. Leaving one's life work to someone who would squander it would be hard to deal with. It's like you got a collection. Collect some Pokemon cards, baseball cards. I collected comic books for a long time. You spend your whole life collecting and collecting, have all the best and the rarest, and then you have to give it away to somebody else and they just go sell it. It made everything seem senseless. All of his efforts were for nothing. Solomon had built up his kingdom through wise investments, shrewd business deals, and skillful moves in war. But when he dies, it will all go to someone who put no effort into building it. To someone who has nothing at risk, but all to gain. They put nothing into building this, but they're going to receive all of it for nothing. Not only is this vanity, but Solomon says it's a great evil. So this is just no good whatsoever. Many parents today believe that it's a moral obligation to leave their children a monetary inheritance. A lot of parents spend a lot of time working and putting money away and saving so that when they die, they can leave it to their kids. But we know that there is no point in working yourself to the bone in order to leave your children a temporal inheritance. Right? We know the downfalls of money. Right? There's no joy in that. The greatest inheritance is a spiritual one. Proverbs 13:22 says, a good man leaveth an inheritance to his children's children. The spiritual inheritance. The gospel of Jesus Christ. The information on salvation for eternal life is the inheritance that's worth leaving for your family. The rest of the verse says, and the wealth of the sinner is laid up for the just. Sinner's going to hoard and hoard and hoard and then lose it. Money, as we discussed in previous Bible verses, is not our goal in life. We should use the money God has given us to glorify Him, to bless our brothers and sisters, and to give it back to God for His work and His purposes. God says that He blesses us so that we can bless others. God has done so much for you. Use that to bless other people, right? Don't hoard it for yourself and keep on to it. Psalmist says it's pointless. It'll do you no good. You won't find any joy in it. Having a big number in the bank account does you no good when you're 6 feet in the dirt and the bank liquidates your account. Leave the spiritual inheritance. Teach your kids in the future the gospel of Jesus so they can get to know Christ and receive eternal salvation and live in heaven for all eternity. That's an inheritance worth leaving. Solomon obviously doesn't have this reference yet. Verse 22. For what hath man of all his labor, and of the vexation of his heart, wherein he hath labored under the sun? Again, Solomon seems to be really falling into the pit of despair here. All of his labor, he says, is in vain. It holds no purpose or everlasting value. Only pain and vanity. That's rough. Because everything I've done so far, it just hurts me to even look at it. Solomon is looking at the labor in regard to the world and for personal gain. You understand, everything he's saying here is temporal. It's of the world. So if you're working for yourself and your own selfish desires to build yourself up here in the world, is pointless vanity and vexation of spirit. But we know that if our labor is for the Lord, it is not in vain. We're told this here in 1 Corinthians 15:58. It says, therefore, my beloved brethren, be ye steadfast, unmovable, always abounding in the work of the Lord, for as much as ye know that your labor is not in vain in the Lord. If you're working for God and following God's will, it's not in vain. But if you're working for yourself, selfish desires, personal gain, and this is what Solomon is getting at here. He's searching for joy in the world. And every single time, he's able to get it. Every single thing he's able to get, and he's telling you it's pointless. The money, the music, the hordes of stash, the buildings, all is pointless. But if you were only working for God, it would not be in vain. It would not be vexation of spirit. Verse 23. For all his days are sorrows, and his travail grief. Yea, his heart taketh no rest in the night. This is also vanity. He continues wailing about the pointlessness of it all. He says there is nothing to hope for except for death. Not a good place to be in, I don't think. He says, all your days are filled with nothing but grievous tasks. There is no real rest, even at night. He puts his head down on the pillow and he's just like, and I'll wait to go back down and see if I die. Right? This is rough, man. He's having to go. But there's no real rest even at night. Nothing but tossing and turning. A life filled with worry and heartache is what he's saying. Sometimes it's very easy to focus on the bad things and allow them to take you down this path of depression. Solomon seems to be heading down this path, and very fast. Very quickly he's heading down. Right? He hasn't put his hope into God. He hasn't tried to search for joy in God. He's turned to the world. And just look what it's doing to him. He's depression, anxiety, pointlessness, suicidal tendencies. And it sounds like he's just ready to jump off the bridge. There's no reason to do anything. He's got it all and it means nothing. Verse 24 and 26. So Solomon starts to pull something out of this though. He says, there's nothing better for a man than that he should eat and drink, and that he should make his soul enjoy good in his labor. This also I saw, that it was from the hand of God. There's a light that picks through. All of a sudden, there's a shining beacon. He turns a little bit to focus on God for just a moment here. After considering everything thus far, Solomon concludes that we should find enjoyment where we can. Enjoy what we must eat and drink and what we have to wear. Find pleasure and happiness where you can, not being gluttonous in the common things of life. God gives good gifts. That doesn't always mean that they will be extravagant. We need to enjoy the normal mercies in life, tastes of good food and drink, and the satisfaction of a job well done. Man cannot enjoy anything of himself. True enjoyment comes from God. Sounds a lot like contentment to me. Now, we spoke a lot about contentment in 1 Timothy. Go back and you watch our 1 Timothy series. We talked a lot about contentment, being content with where you are, what you've been given, right? There's no need to seek out for the big things, in life, right? Be happy, sit back and enjoy it. What work has God given you to do? Do it heartily and feel good about doing a good job. Work for God and not for yourself, and find joy. Now, the Apostle Paul later writes in similar fashion here. This is interesting. So Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 15:32. He says, "If after the manner of men I have fought with beasts at Ephesus, what advantageth it me, if the dead rise not? Let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die." Paul is saying, if Christ didn't die on the cross and was resurrected, there is no point. Eat and drink, you're going to die tomorrow. But Christ did rise from the dead. So there is hope. We've talked about for all of sin to come short of the glory of God. We've talked about that the wages of sin is death. But Christ did rise, right? God commended his love towards us, and that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us in Romans 5:8, and then 10:9, thou shalt confess with thy mouth, Lord Jesus, and believe in thine heart, and God hath raised him from the dead, thou shalt be saved. I like throwing verse 13 in there. Whosoever calleth upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. There is hope. If you put your joy and your efforts and your labor in God, there is hope and joy, the fruits of the Spirit, the armor of God, purpose, and life everlasting. But if you take the path that Solomon took, to try to find the joy and purpose in the world, pointless. The best part about this is, through his experience, we can experience what we could never experience through Solomon. I can never have all of the things that I want. I will never have the position of authority that Solomon held. Not the money, the music, the things, the abilities to do. He did. And he was able to tell us through that experience, it's a waste of time. Live for God and not yourself. Solomon here is feeling completely hopeless. But we do not have to have those feelings. Our hope is not in the riches of the world. Our hope is in Jesus Christ. Verse 25. For who can eat, or who else can hasten hereunto more than I? He says, who can enjoy more things than Solomon? He's done it all to the extent that this world can offer. And if there's no hope after our life under the sun, he sees no point in it. Again, live for yourself. In Matthew 10:39, one of my favorite verses ever, he who finds his life will lose it. He who loses his life for my sake and the gospel will find it. Jesus says, don't live for yourself, live for me. Give up those things and come to me, and you will find life everlasting, hope and joy. Verse 26, for God giveth to a man that is good in his sight, wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner he giveth travail to gather and to heap up, that he may give to him that is good before God. This is also vanity and vexation of spirit. He says Solomon can deduce something very important out of all this vanity and vexation of spirit. God rewards righteousness and punishes sin. To one who follows God, he will give wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the one who lives his life of sin, chasing vanity, he will give the burden of hard work, to gather up for nothing and to give it all away to someone who God chooses. Money isn't always a blessing. Sometimes it's a major stumbling block. I know the feeling like, boy, if I could just make a little bit more money. Ooh, if I just had another $150 or something in the bank account. Ooh, life would be so much better. It's not true. It's just not. The Bible tells us it does not matter. whether your bank account has a big goose egg in there or 37 figures across the board, it will bring you no joy. Okay, so final thoughts here for us. 1, are you seeking for earthly pleasure or the joy found in Christ? Where's your focus at? Are you worried about what you can do and what you can achieve for the things that you want? Or are you asking Jesus what his will is for your life? Let God give you the work so that you can find joy in doing it, right? Solomon says if you're working for yourself, it's all vanity. It's pointless, unsatisfactory. You'll suffer all the days of your life if you try to work for yourself. So what are you working for? 2, are you finding joy in your labor for the Lord or depression in your earthly labor? When I lived in Alabama, I worked in the shipyards down there. I was making 6 figures a year. I also worked 90 hours a week. Taking home $2,000 every single Friday, $8,000 a month, ding, 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 ding. Let me tell you, I couldn't sleep. I had minimal hours of sleep, working myself to death. The money in the bank account did nothing for me. And it's easy to fall into depression when you have money, but you have no time to do anything with it. You can work yourself to death, work your fingers to the bone to build money into your bank account. Nothing. Just to look at it. So what are you working for? 3, are you finding contentment in what God has blessed you with? Or are you seeking more? Solomon said he got everything. And it was a vexation of spirit. He said he still longed for something. He took his focus off of God and turned it to the temporal things of the world. He said, I couldn't fill the hole that was inside of me. I wanted more and more and more. And then I got everything, and then I got more. And it did me no good. Find contentment. Be happy. Find the joy in what God has given to you. Your life will be so much more rewarding living for Christ than for living for yourself.